Vic, we're not in the chat anymore. Hey everyone, it's Chris from HEDERA again, and this month, we're not doing a VU, we're not doing a Breath and Timber. Instead, we're going to talk about our first commission from Victor Logan here.
Yes, sir.
He runs a podcast or a couple, and he reached out to us to write his first jingle. So Victor, who are you?
So, as he already said, my name is Victor Logan. Perfect. They call me Deuce in the streets. You know what I mean?
Up.
So, I've actually known these guys for a very long time.
Yeah.
I was in the band in the beginnings, back in the day in high school.
Mm-hmm. He's actually the guitarist you hear on our first album, Helix.
Yeah, I dabbled a little bit.
He still shreds.
I try. He was actually one of the first co-hosts on Mr. Input podcast.
Such a weird cross there.
Right? A little cross promotion, cross little. But yeah, I've known these guys for a very long time, and I moved on to newer projects, and the project I'm working on right now is a little podcast network.
A network.
Network of two podcasts.
Huge.
What an ad boy, but huge two podcast network. The first podcast, Black Lives Chatter.
Great name. I love it.
Black Lives Chatter is a podcast, black stories, black people, from the words of Black Mouths.
I love it.
Exactly. The second podcast, Missed Input Podcast. Now that podcast is about video games, news, video game news. Right? So we tie it all together. We actually give our opinions on it, and you see our personalities come out through that. It's a great podcast. A lot of fun we have. So, for the Missed Input podcast, I actually got you guys to make a jingle, as you said earlier. Came to you guys with 4 specific things.
Anthony, throw them up there.
The first thing,
Numero
less than
uno.
60 seconds.
There it is.
Can't be too long, The second thing, it has to be catchy. I want you to be humming the podcast jingle after you're done listening to the podcast.
Exactly. Stick with you, right?
Stick with it. The third thing is that it had to have that HEDERA feel, yet still be reminiscent of electronics and video games and all that stuff.
Perfect.
The fourth thing is that I forget. But it was such a good take. The fourth one was no vocals, right? We don't want your voice in there at all.
Yeah, no Chris, that's fine.
Yeah, I just didn't want the vocals to distract from that melody that's very catchy. So with those 4 things, we were hoping to have a unique podcast intro in the sea of podcasts.
Absolutely.
Something very, truly special.
It'll help you stand out. And it was a really cool project for us because we're used to writing our own music, interpreting covers. We do that a lot. But to come up with something original for someone else was a bit of a challenge. So what we're going to do now is go to the shed, and I'll show you guys how HEDERA worked through those 4 points to create a cool jingle for Vic. So now on 3, we're going to snap, and we're going to go to the shed. All right. 3, 2, 1. Did it go? It's another day, and we are back at the shed. And we're going to go over the 4 points that Victor brought up. Less than 60 seconds. Gotta have a good melody. It's gotta sound like HEDERA. And none of that vocal nonsense. With those 4 points combined, we made the best podcast introduction we could for the Missed Input podcast. Now, the first point goes over timing. Right? If the intro is too long, then it kind of drags. But if it's too short, then you don't even realize that you heard it. So 60 seconds is a pretty good sweet spot for an introduction such as this. And to prove that point, we're going to make the rest of this video in 60 seconds. Starting now. The next point goes over melody, right? Victor wanted a good melody, and I don't blame him. So to show you what we put together, we're going to have Anthony here play it for us. The third point, Victor specifically asked for something by HEDERA. It's got to sound like us. What does that mean? Well, HEDERA writes jazz music with rock instrumentation. It sounds kind of like this. And the last point is that Victor doesn't want any vocals. And that's because vocal melodies get in the way of instrumental melodies. Great to work with you, man.